Today what we're going to do is an exercise in measuring and marking and learning how to draw an animal skeleton. We do this by practicing proportion. We're going to do what is called sight measuring. Now what's proportion, you say? Proportion is the principle of design concerning comparing sizes of parts of things. For example, here's my hand, and we can tell that my pinky is my smallest finger, my middle finger is my longest finger. These two fingers, the ring and index finger, are the same length, and the thumb is a short finger, but it's wider. What we're going to do is we're going to measure. In this case, I'm going to draw a dog. So I'm going to be measuring the dog in proportion to its skull. So here's the measurement of the skull. What I do is I put my thumbnail at the point of measurement from the tip of the pencil to wherever I hold my thumb on the pencil. So here it is. I'm picking up a measurement of a skull, and I can tell that we have one skull here. And if I bring it down this way and I center it on the middle of the skull where it comes out, it's somewhere about the middle of this bone here. So from here to here is the length of a skull. So we've got one skull, two skulls. If I keep measuring, I've got three skulls, four skulls, and then we come down at an angle. So from 4, I'm going to pick up the measurement of this bone here and compare it to the skull. It's about a little more than 3/4. Maybe we'd call it 5/8 of a skull. I can pick up that measurement, and it goes here. When you're measuring in inches, you always compare. Let's say it is something 2 inches long, 3 inches long, or is it a 1/2 inch long, or 3/4 of an inch long, or 1/4 of an inch. So we can do the same thing for with the skull. First, I want to look at the angle, so I'm going to take my marker, in your case it'll be a pencil, and compare it to the angle of the skull on the dog. So I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to say that's the length of the skull. Now I'm not sure it's the correct length, so I'm going to have to measure it in accordance to the body and make sure it fits on the paper. So then I'm going to take my small skull and measure it. Here's the length of the skull here. And measure here from the center of the skull here. We've got that bone. So I'm going to take this and measure from here. Here's the big skull measurement. From the center of the skull, make sure I kind of match the angle. The angle's coming down to about here. And then coming up, now this big bone would be the next bone I measure. If I measure it and compare it to the skull, it's about that 5/8 of a skull. So I'm going to pick up that same 5/8 measurement of a skull here. And then I need to bring it down at an angle. This bone is about halfway on this bone here. So then I'm going to take my measurement here and put it about halfway. Make a point there and here. And that's where this bone is going to be. I think the angle should be a little bit different, so I'll probably move it from here to here. So that's where this bone is. You can actually measure how wide you think the bone is for instructional purposes. I'm using this dark marker so we can actually see what I'm drawing here. Drawing this bone. Now, before we draw the skull, if I look at the skull, it has this bump here where the eye socket goes, and I'm going to measure that and see how much of the skull that is. It's a little more than halfway, so if I look at this line here, so a little bit more than halfway. I have that bump. Then I need to measure how big is this in relation to the width of the skull. And it's about halfway. So if I take half the big skull, it's about from here from the dot to here. And for now, I would be actually drawing lightly, but for instructional purposes, you can't see. The camera can't pick it up, so I'm using a marker. So I have this bone here, and usually I'm drawing lightly once again, so I'm just going to put that on there. And then we've got, how many skulls do we have? We've got 1, 2, and then from here we got 3, 4, not quite 5. 1, 2, 3. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4, and a little more, which would be 5. So let me go ahead and mark 1, 2, 3. This is here, 4. So I'm just going to write 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have, if I bring this down at an angle from this point here, or this bone, I'll measure that in relation to the skull, which is almost a skull. It's about right up to here. And I'm going to try and match that angle here. We have this bone. Kind of rough it out. Half it helps to look at the space that's carved into your shapes, and this bone comes about almost halfway in the middle. And of course there's a bone in front of it, but that doesn't matter. So I've got the length of the dog minus the tail. Next thing I'm going to do is, then I have that spine coming up. So I know the spine's going to be somewhere here. And then the next thing I need to do is I can check this bone here. And the next thing I can do is measure the length of the rib cage. How many skulls long is it? So I can make a mark, say, here. So I'm looking for a mark somewhere in here. But I need to measure how wide it is in relation to the length of the skull, which is almost a skull. One note that I failed to mention is that if you start out with a skull that was way too big and it went off the page, then you'd have to make this shorter. Or if it was too small and you're just like not using enough paper, then you need to make the skull a little bigger. Sometimes it helps to look as a whole to see if, you know, because you're measuring small units, to make sure it looks kind of right. Because if it doesn't, then you might have to remeasure. And so that's how you measure. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a drawing using a pencil. and do it all over at high speed.